We'd like to thank Cloud Foundry, our sponsor, for these podcasts from Cloud Foundry Summit in Frankfurt, Germany. Cloud Foundry gives companies the speed, simplicity, and control they need to develop and deploy applications faster and easier. It's open source, easy to iterate, and built to scale. Learn more at cloudfoundry.org. Hey, it's Alex Williams, the new Stack, here with Holger Mueller. How are you, sir?
I'm always good in my home country, Alex. Good to see you.
Yeah, you must enjoy coming to conferences here.
It's easy. I love conference in general when I don't have to see TSA. Technically not possible when in Germany. But
yeah.
No, this was a driving trip, so it's great.
Yeah.
Lots of traffic, but normally a 30-minute trip was a 90-minute trip, but hey, you don't have to be on a flight. We all appreciate that.
Holger's with Constellation Research, and what is your beat, so to speak, your expertise, your area of study that you focus on?
You mean my coverage area?
Your coverage area.
Don't worry. That's what the analysts talk about, their coverage area. So for this conference, I have two actually. I'm not going to talk about the other one. We'll keep it secret. But the one for this one is next generation applications. When do we enterprise build new software? What are the tools, what are the platforms, what are the best practices, who are the players, where can they find the people?
So you brought a friend.
Yeah, I brought a friend. I haven't given a name to you yet. Have you a suggestion for a name? She looks like...
what would you say?
She is Cloud Foundry Clara or something?
Yeah, Clara.
So she's baptized now, Cloud Foundry Clara.
There we are.
As an early bird register, which Cloud Foundry did for me nicely enough, you can get a Lego figurine. Which
Clara's perfect. I think that's Clara right there.
The only problem I have now, I have two daughters at home and will fight for that. 10 and 12 will fight for
Clara?
Cloud Foundry Clara.
You know, that's a battle that is hard to get in between. I mean, if we compare it to technology battles.
That's almost like a hard technology battle between Oracle and SAP or IBM and AWS, to talk more recent things or whatever. Right?
What's your take on Cloud Foundry right now?
I hate where Cloud Foundry is right now because
Why?
I wrote a blog post about Cloud Foundry Summit in Santa Clara. It's the king of PaaS, right? So analysts don't like a clear situation in the market, right? So this is why, I mean, congratulations to them. I don't hate where they are. They're in a good spot because of many good moves, right? But as an analyst advising end users to buy software, they make it, unfortunately for our business, very easy right now where to look at for a PaaS platform, number one at least, because they've done so many right moves. Yeah. So basically they successfully worked with the OpenStack community. They got the early investment from large technology players and end users, right? Don't forget about GE investing, is it 3 years ago? Something like this, right? So very early, then building that platform, taking a little longer. Some ISVs who were early adopters of the platform can't be named, but they even dropped out, lost faith, now back on that platform. And they are multi-cloud, right? So every executive I speak to, ultimately, when we do this cloud thing, we don't want to put all eggs in one basket. We want to have the capability, at least on paper, at least theoretically, they're not going to do it right away. Probably some of them are doing it right away to be deployed to multiple public clouds.
How have they done it as well with the developer at the same time? That's one of I think the biggest challenges you see with these open source foundations is how do you really appease the executive, but really make it something that's compelling for the developer.
I think developers like open source in general, right? The question is, there's so many open source initiatives who don't have steam and don't have the endorsement, right? For sometimes in the enterprise space, people said, oh, we're just going to make our semi-failed offering an open source offering, then surprised that nobody's building on it on top, right? And it's not open source if it's only the vendor building stuff. So I think they got the critical mass. I think still 2/3 of committers are Pivotal / Cloud Foundry employees, but they got the critical mass adoption from other partners in the ecosystem. Because the interesting thing is, right, if you look at, I think Sam showed 130, 150 complete FDE committers or something. For the players who are endorsing it, I mean, GE, IBM, Microsoft, SAP, right? 100 developers, 200 developers are not even rounding error in the budget, right?
Right.
So, and they get the attraction by being the safe place for the individual developer coming to those to build something as a skill. If I want to build a PaaS in the cloud, a general purpose PaaS, it's very clear that's the place to go because I don't want to be potentially in bed with one stack or another stack because my next customer might not like that stack, and then I have to say, hey, zero experience. So this gives me the chance as a freelance developer to say, do you want to go to AWS? You're still a VMware shop? You want to go to IBM SoftLayer? You want to go to Azure? I can deploy for you for that.
How do you then delineate, I mean, with Cloud Foundry and other platforms that are, that are built on Kubernetes, for example, right? You have OpenShift and you have Deis and you have, a host of different platforms that are leveraging Kubernetes. I think of Kubernetes in particular. I expect one of the differences is the youth of Kubernetes in comparison. But is that an existential threat to Cloud Foundry, or is it not even a threat at all?
No, everything which changes the programming model, right, is a threat to a proven development platform, right? So microservices, containers are a threat to a certain point, different interpretation, right? There's this battle of religion, which we saw mostly last year between the Pivotal guys, Cloud Foundry guys, versus the rest of the world, right? And Kubernetes sees a lot of traction, but Kubernetes wants to be independent of the PaaS layer, right? So I think it's more religious war, but that's a potential threat for them. I absolutely agree with you. All the other PaaS players, though, have faltered and not gotten that mindshare, right? That's why I would love, as an analyst, helping end users pick the right PaaS platform, to have like 4 or 5 different ones where you can say, there's right ones in every area. But unfortunately, like I said, good for Cloud Foundry, it's a pretty easy situation or not. No.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I guess the challenges will come as they continue to find the ways to continue to build out Bosch and the cloud services around it with the choices of how they're going to make it easy for application developers to build things easily. Right. So containers are a natural, aspect of that, as are, build packs for that matter, as are Rocket containers versus OCI environments versus Rocket and so on.
Agree. But I think Cloud Foundry is also at the cusp. I think if you give it 1 or 2 more years, that there's such a big ecosystem that the container providers, including Kubernetes, would love to run in combination with Cloud Foundry too. Right? So that's the benefit of if you are the 800-pound gorilla, which I think they're not yet, right? Still open, but they're growing towards that. Once you're the 800-pound gorilla, everybody brings business to you.
Right. Right. So if you can actually kind of be able to span these multiple platforms, and is this to you any sign of what we're seeing in the overall cloud services community? Do you buy that we are seeing a deeper embracing and actual use of multiple cloud environments?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And it's not just AWS, but because everybody else, there are 3 phases. We have a 3-phase model for cloud adoption. Right? The phase 1 of cloud adoption is over, where AWS was everybody's partner. Everybody was happy for that crazy company in Seattle pulling up for CapEx to put machines on, and everybody else was on more lucrative pieces. It turns out it was pretty good business for AWS, as they show their numbers right now, because they were the only vendor in the space where the cloud business, which has maybe a teenage number of margins, would be good for their business because more profitable than retail. Everybody else in the market putting 10 million, 100 million investment there, put in the core business or put it into this new data center IaaS business, would put in the core business, right? Now we're in phase 2 where everybody's measured from their stock evaluation, if they're public, on their cloud revenues. So everybody is desperate for that, right? So we're seeing people taking away a load from AWS. Oracle's not happy to run Oracle and AWS anymore. SAP is not happy to run AWS. Well, they recently partnered again, but originally, 1 year ago, they weren't happy about this because everybody wanted every cloud dollar out of that, right? So this is phase 2 where it's not clear, and AWS is very open about this, saying we always have this model of projecting the move to the cloud to 24 hours, right? They say we haven't even had our early morning coffee, which is a realistic assessment because depending who you talk to, 10, 15, maybe 20% of load has moved to the cloud. The big thing still has to happen. And the question is who's going to capture that market share? And it could be, and it seems like very well with the pattern that we're seeing are kind of the acceptance of using multiple platforms, right? So what I mean is you would use AWS, but you would also use Google, for example, if you want to use you want to take advantage of their data analytics services that they offer.
Right, or because you just got a very good deal by Google or anybody else, which beats AWS, right? And you want to be able to transfer the cloud, right? Because so many more market entrants trying to get cloud dollars will have a very dynamic pricing, cost, and feature landscape, like you mentioned, Google from analytics perspective, going forward, right? Microsoft yesterday, I don't know if you've seen that, like in Atlanta with the FPGA equipped cloud now, right? Where every server has a pre-coprocessor, I would call it, right? And making it a software-defined network before with a very tough to program gate array actually.
Right.
But the demo where they showed like translating Wikipedia, right? The biggest piece of document linked together in English, right? Which is I don't know how many petabytes of data. Translating that into English in less than the blink of an eye. And being able to do that on all of Azure is very, very impressive.
Yeah, very impressive, isn't it?
So we'll see differentiation in the cloud infrastructure architecture by itself. We'll see differentiation on the pricing side and the capability side. And that means as an enterprise, I can't put my eggs in one basket.
We're seeing the resurgence of hardware as a differentiator in some respects too, then. With that, it's especially striking with you see the news from Microsoft about these FPGAs.
Well, it's going to be the Google TPUs against the Microsoft FPGAs. I want to see the shootout of that. It's going to come some point.
Yeah, it's going
Satya was talking yesterday about some kind of world championship for analytical processing, and that Microsoft won one for patterns, another one for speech. Maybe soon, like we have a soccer world championship being in Germany every 4 years. Every quarter we have the machine learning world championships in different categories. So
there you go.
Yeah.
How does that affect, do you think, the open source communities that are like building software now for these cloud services that with such changing architectures, where like you could see like a balkanization, where you could see, for example, you could only like run software that meets these kind of like has these specs and criteria.
Yep. No, I think that might come back. That's a risk, right? I think you will have to have abstraction layers for different cloud deployments, knowing that you go this way or that way. If you deploy to Azure versus Google Cloud Platform versus AWS or whoever else might be in the mix. So that's I think that's pretty clear that will happen. But that also means, and that's actually something helping Cloud Foundry or the big guys, probably OpenShift too, who have the resources to understand these different permutations of the underlying infrastructures and making sure that you can still deploy, test a validated solution to these. Should compliance huge driver, right? We're in Europe, right? So for the first time, the Microsoft managed Azure Cloud by Telecom is here. So nobody in Europe is afraid anymore that the NSA might commission a US citizen to give them access to the data. IBM opened the first Scandinavian IaaS in Norway last week, right? So really in the infancy days of that. So often it might not even be that I don't like the cloud infrastructure or I can't afford that a little more expensive price. It's legislation which mandates you to move somewhere else or move to a certain location or a certain provider.
So what does that mean then, do you think, for open source software in general? It seems like one of the givens right now with open source, with software at least, is it's increasingly difficult to sell proprietary software.
Yeah.
There's
no proprietary software anymore.
No, it's increasingly difficult to really, charge anyone for open source software. But there's always a need for compute.
Yep.
There's always a need for speed.
There's always a need for storage.
There's always a need for storage.
There's always a need for networking.
Right. So is that an opportunity for open source software providers to say, for example, hey, here's the fast version of our open source software, and here's the standard, commodity version of it?
Yeah, theoretically that option exists, right? But usually the strategy is I'm going to charge for services. Right, and I don't like being a former software guy. I don't like the service alley because people have to sleep, drink, take vacation, right? So you can't charge that much out of a person in a service model than you can out of software. You build software, it works once, it scales, it never sleeps, never drinks, never takes a break, right? It runs, does what it was supposed to do. So this is why I'm never much such a fan, but service is a popular model, and then doing the premium, making it easier, right? Allowing you to give you the monitoring, the running across. That's the known two alleys of the open source providers. But it's going to get harder. So we'll see, I think, less smaller open source projects, which actually will ultimately fail, but we'll see less innovation because the big guys kill the innovation but have to live with the complexity of deploying to these different cloud infrastructures.
We only have a few minutes left, but I did want to ask you your take on what you're seeing happen in the Docker community and the container ecosystem. You know, the discussions, there have been discussions of a fork. There's lots of discussion about it now and what its implications are.
Right.
What's your sense of that developing story?
It's interesting, right? Because it offers a new way of building software, which still in some aspects in its infancy. Being an enterprise software guy, for a long time I couldn't even figure out what to do, honestly, with containers and microservices because there was no persistence. Right? Nothing in the enterprise works without persistence. You have to keep records, you want to store stuff, you want to keep stuff. People come back the next day to work, right? So persistence has been figured out right now. And then I see when we advise end users about containerization that there's an interest and there's an awareness, but roughly only a third of new next generation applications go down the container route.
Right.
Yeah, which means 2/3 go the conventional route because they need to be comfortable, they need to deliver a date, it was too risky, they can't get their developers qualified. And I don't see, and that's interesting, that rate changing for the last 2-3 years. So it's going to be a long term. I don't think containers will go mainstream for when companies build custom software very, very quickly. There will remain like the 2 out of 3, 1 out of 2, 1/3 of the application system, which has big ramifications because it means someone like Cloud Foundry needs to support multiple ways of building even your software in the long run. AWS will have to do the same thing. Google will have to do the same thing. I mean, when Google certifies Microsoft SQL, they basically bring in the old way of working because they need the old way of working because companies still run both of it, right? I can't, even if I truly got the microservice religion, I can't provide everything. I need the data in those older kind of like technologies available. I still need APIs, SOAP or REST, whatever that battle was. So I think there's a pragmatic approach to it, and I think pragmatism is always leading companies down the right way, not the religious battle of saying we have to go 100% this way, 100% that way.
Well, it's going to come down to workloads, right? You know, like how you define those workloads and, you know, how you run those workloads across that infrastructure and multiple types of
infrastructure. And how do you shift those workloads, right? So microservices are a different way to build new applications.
Right.
And how much adoption is there, right? Even if 100% of new projects, if you were only allowed to do microservices, roughly we see 1/10 of custom software being rewritten every 10 years. So even if everybody had to do microservices, it would take 10 years to be 100% there.
Well, this has been a terrific conversation, Holger. Thank you so much for joining us here, and and Clara.
With Cloud Foundry Clara here,
Thanks for joining us, Clara. We'd love to see you back again soon.
She was a little quiet here, but she probably built some code while we were dabbling, right?
She's kind of prepping for it.
Clara, are you doing microservices or are you doing more SOAP or she's thinking about it? Of course
I have something to tell you about microservices.
She has blue hair. She's definitely doing microservices, I'm sure. What do you think about Bosch, Clara? Oh, she's taking the fifth. She's smart. She's at a Cloud Foundry conference. She's wearing a Cloud Foundry shirt, so she's not going to say anything about Bosch complexity or so. Well, thank you, Alex.
Thanks, Claire.
It was fun.
Thanks, Holger.
It was a pleasure. Good to see you.
We'd like to thank Cloud Foundry, our sponsor, for these podcasts from Cloud Foundry Summit in Frankfurt, Germany. Cloud Foundry gives companies the speed, simplicity, and control they need to develop and deploy applications faster and easier. It's open source, easy to iterate, and built to scale. Learn more at cloudfoundry.org.